The Pentagon also telling Congress China now outpaces the U.S. in missile launchers. What does that mean? Let's bring in Florida Republican Congressman Mike Waltz. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee, which held that hearing today. A lot to dig into there. But what does that last point tell you?
Well, look, Sandra, we're facing the largest and most serious enemy military buildup in modern history. The Chinese Navy is now larger than the U.S. Navy. They are cranking out new ships at a rate of 5 to 1. Their Space Force is launching more into space than the United States and the rest of the world combined. As you mentioned, they're also launching new technologies that we are struggling to play catch up, including hypersonic missiles that are incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for us right now to defend against. So, look, I think I agree with my colleague Ro Khanna. The president should start with China tonight. He needs to describe it for what it is, which is the most serious adversary we have ever faced, because even against the Soviet Union, we never faced one that could rival us economically and technologically at the same time they could militarily. And so we need to hear from the president. I believe that this spy balloon was a Sputnik moment for all Americans. We've been talking about this tidal wave of espionage that we're facing, but often that is obviously behind the scenes. This was very visible, very tangible, and I think it should serve as a wake-up call now for the new Cold War that we're in, just as it did back in the 1950s against the Soviet Union and their satellite.
I'm probably catching you a little off guard here, but have you had a chance to look at these brand new pictures on this? We have them on our screen right now for our viewers. The U.S. Navy just released the first images of the recovery of the debris. They're pulling them up into those inflatable boats that Dave Sears just described as we continue to watch the debris being recovered from the waters there. What is your reaction so far from what we have seen pulled out of the water?
Well, look, I mean, thank God for the U.S. Navy and their capabilities. And I think we're going to learn a lot from this recovery. My point would be, though, we shot it down, the administration saying it's a good thing we let it traverse the entire mainland and shot it down over the ocean so that we can have this recovery. My point is we shot it down over the wrong ocean. It should have been shot down over the Pacific Ocean, and we still are lacking clarity on the decisions that were made and why they were made as we saw this approaching our airspace and Canadian airspace, and why it took a bunch of enterprising photographers and civilians to alert the Congress and alert the country to what was going on.
This is the former commander on the Cold War comparison that was made at the hearing earlier today. I want to play it out for you and get your reaction.
It is a shame that the Secretary of State's visit was canceled or postponed. At the height of the Cold War, we should never forget that we maintained diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union, even in those dark days of the 60s and 70s. So I hope that we get back on some diplomatic footing with the PRC. It's important to both countries.
Your reaction to that, Congressman?
Well, of course, we need diplomatic relations, and we always have a risk of some type of catastrophic miscalculation. But I'll also point out that our adversaries need to see consequences for aggressive actions. I mean, Sandra, this was essentially kind of a middle finger to diplomacy to take this action right before Blinken's visit. And if we just kept on with business as usual, that could be interpreted by our adversaries around the world, on top of the Afghanistan withdrawal and on top of Chinese propaganda, that America is weak, there's no consequences for our action, and that we are truly a power in decline. So I think actually that Secretary Blinken was right to cancel his visit. That doesn't mean we reestablish. And back to the Cold War, Reagan famously walked out of the summit with Gorbachev when they didn't come to the table with what we understood was what was going to be agreed. So there's also, you got to be willing to walk away in diplomacy and demonstrate consequences for bad actions.
Really good to get your thoughts on all of that, Congressman. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, John.